The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
Your host here, Eric Cavanaugh. And what a crazy year it's been, huh, folks? 2021 is almost in the rearview mirror. And today we're going to talk about some trends, some predictions with a couple of experts. Actually, we have 3 experts total on the show. One was pre-recorded. Our buddy from DataFold will be in our podcast bonus segment. We also have David Blaszkowsky from a company called Helios Data, and our good buddy Joseph GRAX from a company called, Joseph Gaska from a company called GRAX. But first, I'll throw out a couple of predictions of my own. Analytics obviously are going to be everywhere. Analytics drive the information economy. We're moving past just data as the fuel. You really have to get the insights and let that drive your changes. I view process mining as a huge, huge win for organizations. I think it really is the key to digital transformation. We got a number of vendors doing work in the process mining space these days. Of course, Celonis is at the top, but ASG is doing some work in that space and a few others as well. That's a big deal. AI, of course, is everywhere. And we're seeing lots of different vendors come around as the sort of foundational solution for being able to leverage AI. Because what do you need? You need lots of data. You need clean data sets that you can trust. And you have to be able to process them, get access to them, and process them in a timely fashion to build the models and to deploy the models, and then to change out the challenger models when the production models aren't doing what you want them to do. So that, of course, is a big deal. Data fabric is a huge deal. Data mesh is a big deal. We're going to be talking a lot about those in the coming year for sure. And really the synthesis of all these different technologies. I think the concept of confluence is really coming to play these days as we leverage the power of data to change our businesses, to change our business models, and to invent new business models, quite frankly. I think a lot of companies did a great job during the last couple of years weathering this pandemic, which has affected all of us in countless ways. But I think, the pressure of the mountains creates diamond from coal. So I think we've had a lot of good ideas sprout into business models. And I think all that is really, most of it, I should say, is good for the consumer. Privacy, we'll talk about privacy as well on the show today. Lots of issues there. Is privacy dead? We had a show the other day where we talked about how privacy will be for the rich. And that may be the case. That may be true. So we'll see. But with that, let's bring in David Blaszkowsky from Helios Data. David, tell us a bit about yourself and your company, and then give us some of your predictions for 2022.
Wonderful. Eric, thank you so much for the opportunity to end the year here with you and to talk a little bit about 2022. Look, David Blaszkowsky, I'm the head of strategy for Helios Data. We're a startup based on data, focused on data sharing, enabling secure and compliant sharing of personal data by enterprises for analytics, for operations, and for, scary word sometimes, monetization. We're based in the Bay Area. I'm sitting here in the Boston area. So, we're even before the pandemic, we were operating kind of virtually. Just by background, kind of a mixed background for this space. I'm a economist by training, and finance by education, also a strategist. I did the McKinsey shtick and others, trying to stay as far away from things like data and technology, except to use it for doing analyses. I spent some time in the publishing area at McGraw-Hill, including at Standard & Poor's, where data was, just the gold, as some would say, the new oil. Choose your phrase. Again, hated tech, hated the mechanics of data, loved the benefits of it. Then the day came when I got a call from the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission to come on over and change all of their filings into data, something that some of you may know as XBRL now. Sort of, it's kind of like, those of you who know a little bit of astronomy, it's kind of like passing the event horizon of a black hole. I just got sucked in from, finally, I'm being spaghettified probably as we speak, if it looks a bit funny. But where the issues were, how do we get data to actually work and to at a very high level, legally and otherwise? All kinds of stuff we can talk about later through there. But it brought me into not just standards, which were very important, but also governance of data, so that whether it's the SEC or an investor trying to interrogate a 10K, how to make sense of it and how to be able to rely on it. When I finished that time, well, privacy was popping up as the big issue, and I made the move over to privacy, which needs and still needs desperately the same challenge of making the data not just safe so you don't get sued, but now how do you make it safe to use? And that's the problem that we've addressed at Helios Data. So just a bit about me. Back to you, Eric.
Yeah, and so you teed up a number of different issues here that I think we should dive into a little bit, and so I'll get on that here. Thinking about privacy, that's a real issue. What I like about the Helios approach is how you've created this sort of container in which the execution takes place, and then the result set comes on the other side. So you've kind of baked in a technology for leveraging this private information, but doing so in a way that protects the parties, right? Both parties. Can you tell us real quick about that, and then we'll go into your predictions?
Right, great. So yes, that's what we do. Actually, there are two technologies that were pre-existing that we kind of brought together. One, as you referred to, is the secure enclave, or what's known as confidential compute, where you can bring together an algorithm or an analytic and data. And once it goes in, it's kind of like Vegas. What goes in, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in what we call our in the secure enclave stays in the enclave. Only results come out. But what we've married to that, right? So no one can see what's going on. Data is never exposed. But to cover the data going in, the data going out, and to provide metrics all around the data about the processing, is that we brought in something called a digital contract. It used to be called maybe a smart contract, but that got sucked up by Ethereum and the blockchain. We're not talking about blockchain. We're talking about code-enabled contracts that are able to incorporate terms from the legal contract, the old paper thing, as well as technical terms from the processing, from the technical environment, who's using it, who has access to information, so that we're able to absolutely ensure that information coming from a data controller, that it's only able to come in from the agreed upon places. It's a contract, mind you. And what takes place in the algorithm, in the container that we talked about, is only happening with an algorithm. By the way, we've fingerprinted that algorithm, and we've included that in the contract. So you can't use another algorithm. You can't, because you don't have access to the data. You can't store it kind of on a thumb drive just in case. We've made it impossible for data to be shared, misused, misappropriated, abused, or otherwise used in a risky way. So, at the end of the day, by using these two technologies, digital contracts and secure enclaves, we've made it possible for companies to take the risk. So the risk out of data sharing, whether internally for models or externally for digital marketing, to be able to cut the costs of being able to put together a contract, such as all the due diligence costs and the technical auditing that needs to be done before a controller will let their data be used. And finally, third, to cut the time to production, the time from the time that it would take to develop an agreement, by taking all this mess out and making it impossible for data to be shared. Privacy by design, brought to what we call the usage risk aspect of data privacy.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and it leads into a prediction for 2022 of so-called first-party data. We had a company on a show a couple months ago who work primarily with media companies, and what they do is they come in and they help you understand what first-party data you have and then what you can do with it. And I say this because a couple reasons. Number one, this whole issue of third-party cookies going away. I guess Google extended it a couple years, but still straw in the wind. And that's been one of the most effective ways to track people and learn about people around the web. So if that's going away, that's pulling the rug out from marketers everywhere. But at the same time, we do have all this alternative data, as it's called in the financial services world, where every last bit of data of every last person in the country has been brokered and rebrokered again, time and again. And so one of the trends that I've seen coming for a while now, I think it'll mature in 2022, is this whole capability of just buying analytics or renting analytics. I'm a manufacturer of clothing for men, for example. What are the hot colors? What do people want in the Boston area versus Maine versus Los Angeles or whatever? That kind of data can now be rented and those insights just purchased. And so you don't have to worry about doing all the analysis yourself. I mean, there is this tendency, I think, for companies to want to do their own analytics, which makes sense. But as I think you know, it's expensive, it's time consuming. You have to have good people who know what they're doing. They have to be dialed into the business. There are all these different issues that have to come together for that to work. But what do you think about that? And what are some other trends that you see coming?
Well, and what you're saying certainly makes sense. However, you have the challenges of, can data be re-identified, right? Is the usage of the data still one that especially in Europe at this point, and maybe in the US at some future time, where any use of the data may need to gain consent? So what you might have is I would be predicting that you might see some of these, that third-party data is going to be going away or diminishing, despite the very best efforts of intermediaries to keep it alive. And to the point you started at, that first-party data is going to be what companies are going to start to excel at building relationships with their customers, gaining their confidence so that they can share that data, and maybe even moving to another concept that's been out there called zero-party data, which is that if you build a close enough relationship with your customer, that they might be willing to volunteer additional data. There may have to be, and this is a trend that I think is out there as well. There will start to be the requirement that if you want to use my data, perhaps you're going to have to give me something that's useful in return. Right. It could be cash, it could be some freebie. It's got to be more than something token as things go into the future. And in fact, some of the new laws out there are addressing this new personal data economy in various ways. But no such thing as a free lunch. That's going to be coming to personal data as well. Or Tonstoffel, as Robert Heinlein, put it. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch.
Right.
So where does this go? I mean, in terms of predictions, looking forward to the next, to the coming year. I mean, you were. I'll start with where you were just pointing. I mean, analytics are finally going to slam full force into the wall of data privacy. Right. If you look not so much at third-party purveyors, but you mentioned Google, there's also the IAB, the Internet Advertising Board, and other players. They are struggling mightily. I get the notes from the W3C meetings as well on advertising businesses. They're struggling mighty to find a way to be able to provide privacy while keeping their business models going. And frankly, flocks and all kinds of ideas coming up. Frankly, I don't think that they're going to work. I don't think that I think there'll be a crisis as rules come into place, at least in Europe, where enforcement is ratcheting up. Maybe not so soon in the US, depending on how CCPA and CDRA, its successor, go. But it's going to be very, very hard to be able to carry out these businesses effectively. And my prediction is that more and more companies are going to fall back on using their first-party data as well as first-party data of other partners with some kind of rigorous mechanism to ensure that all consent is being used and that there's no visibility into the data whatsoever. By the way, that's kind of what we do, so I might be a bit biased. Right. Let me just call that out. Right. In full freedom. Yeah. But the strange thing is that this is not just happening in the big markets that we talk about. This is happening all over the world. Our largest client is Southeast Asian telecom, largest telecom in the region. Countries that don't even have laws fully in effect yet are already bracing for this, and the large telecoms and financial institutions are also getting ready for this, because this is the way that things are going. In ad tech, even within financial institutions, when you think of the fintech models that are out there, like consumer lending, you have all kinds of personal information, including the alternative data that you're talking about. All of this is fair game. Much of it can be considered personal. It's all going to have to be heavily secured, because in the end, it might be tracked back to a person. And we can tie that to the next prediction, is that AI is going to get the same kind of treatment as well. AI ethics will be a real thing.
December 30th, it's real. Tomorrow is the last day of the year. And then 2022 is upon us. We're talking predictions. We just spoke with David Blaszkowsky from Helios Data. Next up, Joseph Gaska from GRAX. Joseph, welcome back to DM Radio. Tell our audience a bit about yourself and your company and what you're doing in the data space, and then give us some of your predictions.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. As always, it's great to be on. GRAX is all about protecting your SaaS data. It's not only just about data protection from a tactical obligation of if something bad happens, how do I recover from it? But also protecting your historical data and how can I reuse it? Now we talk about historical data. You guys mentioned analytics earlier on. How do I get and collect and protect my data so I have access to it to use in the AI of my choice, the machine learning of my choice? When I protect it, it's also protecting the optionality of where do I want to use that data. It's actually breaking down the protected closed ecosystems that people are forming in these SaaS communities, saying, not only protect my data that I can recover from it, but how do I want to reuse it? And that's really where it comes down to. And that's where GRAX is founded about how do I protect myself, protect my future self, and saying I have optionality of reusing that historical data. And that was a premise of why we founded GRAX and how we built the technology that's underneath it itself.
Yeah, I love this. How do I protect my future self? That's cool, man. We got to get that on future proof.
And it's really the truth. It's, as Moore's law is driving down the cost of compute and the cost of storage, taking every version of data that you have allows you to use AI and machine learning to do basic things like variance detection, anomaly detection. All of that is based on historical data. Now, when GRAX set out to protect companies, when you turn GRAX on from day one, that's your day one, your day zero. You're starting to collect or record everything you're doing. Think of GRAX as your black box of your SaaS data. We're collecting and protecting everything that you own. And the biggest thing that we set out when we built the architecture, and this was critical when we thought about it, we said, okay, if we're going to protect companies, we're going to protect the data, collect the highest fidelity, highest frequency of their historical data. But not only are we going to protect it, we're going to make sure that the customer owns it forever. It's in their cloud of choice. They bring their own cloud. That's day one. We don't want to hold companies hostage. We want to protect them. And when we set out to do our best intent, we want to protect them, store all their data in their cloud of choice that they want. They can choose where they want to use any machine learning or AI. If I want to store it in AWS and use it in Azure, fantastic. If I want to use it in Snowflake, fantastic. Highest fidelity, highest frequency. But this is really where it started off. We said, okay, if we're going to protect customers, we want to make sure we maintain the chain of custody of data. This is critical when we set out. Data never leaves their environment. We maintain that chain of custody and we make sure that customers can prove that if they're audited. Now, this is really where it stems from. Okay, when we set out to do this, we really set out, this was the basis of when we launched. We work with the biggest global companies from around the world. And it's, whether it's an industry, regulated industry in financial, healthcare, or even government agencies, they chose us because data never leaves their environment. We are not another SaaS provider that takes your data from one SaaS application and locks it in our cloud. No, we put it in the customer's cloud. It stays there, they retain it forever. And that was critical job one of kind of launching GRAX and getting it off, and that was critical. And that's really where it comes into my predictions of where the world's going and kind of how the data and the critical pieces of it. That's where we started. That's current day one. We started there. That is our goal. We live it, breathe it, and eat it every single day. Now, one of the biggest things with data, I think, Dave mentioned it earlier, is trust. How can I trust this data? As you mentioned it earlier too, is, what the world's coming down to now is not only do I trust my data, how do I make sure that I can look back at the transactional chaining of the data? How do I look at the lineage? Where did it originate from? How can I make sure the proof, the signature of who had that data and where it came from that I'm using, and how can I prove it?
Sure.
You've seen it in the world today. Like, how do you prove it in where did the data originate in the political systems during the election cycle? How do you know where that data originated from?
That's right? Yeah, it's huge. This is a huge issue. Go ahead.
You're seeing the birth and people having this discussion in blockchain. Yeah, blockchain was the hot piece to talk about because the financial equivalent of how do I chain these transactions so I can prove where it came back from. Well, guess what? Now that data is becoming that valuable, and proof and auditability of origination of data is that critical. My prediction is not only saying, okay, chaining the data and looking at the data itself from financial transactions, but if you want to, you mentioned it earlier about YouTube and authors' rights. How do I prove where this came from and the distribution? How do I follow that back? If you want to monetize that money, if data is being distributed, you have to be able to track that chain of data and the distribution so you can monetize that. That chaining of data is already here. It's already upon us. People are talking Web3 and how are we looking at all of those pieces. This is the most critical piece, and data protection is going to lead that and say, okay, if you're going to protect my data and you're going to make sure that you can prove the auditability of that, chaining that data, not only from transactional or lineage, is one of the most critical pieces of our system that we've built. And of people's right now saying, okay, not only can you prove the data, and we have every single version of data, we are transactionally chaining that data together. So when you want to build analytics on historical data, we can chain the transactions so you can show the trending. That's basic 101 in analytics. But when we built the kind of historical repository of what is GRAX, chaining it together was critical. So I think, and you're going to hear it in 2022. Well, the first prediction I think we should all say is this pandemic's coming to an end in 2022. Let's just say that's the number one.
Let's say it and believe it and make it so.
Let's just say that one. But
I think you're right.
But my biggest piece is the, as I've said, data creates data, right? So historical data and knowing the transactions between A and B, and not only the A and B, but distribution of data and who's read it and who's looked at it and who's viewed it and how those transactions are happening. That is the most critical piece, and especially when it comes to historical data. When you're taking historical data and you're taking data point A and data point B, how do you know that they didn't eliminate two versions between A and B, and that really should be D because that skewed the metric set?
Yeah, right.
These two pieces.
Well, certification of data. So I think you're really onto something here that's pretty important, because again, in a world where deep fakes are going to be everywhere, they're already happening now. And deep fakes are occurring mostly in the sort of celebrity space, right? Or a little bit in the political space, but in the business world, oh my goodness, like how much damage could be done? You're already seeing these different kinds of scams. In fact, at least a client of mine almost paid, I think it was like $8,000 to some scam artist because they had pilfered, they got access to their email systems and they saw that a transaction was going to go through, and they sent an email apparently from me or at my company with like some other domain that was similar, saying, hey, would you mind using this bank account we just changed for our transaction of invoice number whatever, that was accurate. And thank God at the last minute, like, did you change? I'm like, no, I didn't change anything. They're like, oh my God, we almost paid these people $8,000. And that's just scratching the surface, right? So I think this, and what you're going to have to see is the big guys like Google, like Microsoft, the main exchange servers, for example, email servers, these major providers are going to have to come to the table and bless a certain process. And I think what you guys have done is very clever, right? Because you're focusing on protecting all of the data, all the SaaS data. You do it in the company's own cloud, for example, so you're not holding them hostage. But that to me is very clever. And I'll kind of tee up another trend that I see coming, which you've also planned for with this whole Parquet file that we, for those who don't know, there's a file format called Parquet, P-A-R-Q-U-E-T. You can look it up on Wikipedia. It came out of the whole Hadoop era, but it's very analytically focused because you have like a little knowledge graph in the beginning of the file, and you have mins and max and all that kind of stuff that gets baked in. So it was designed with analytics in mind. And by saving data in that file format, along with the organic format that is from the application, you're enabling reuse. And see, I know all about this stuff because I'm in the marketing world. I've done ETL myself for years. I know all about this stuff. And it's basically a pain in the butt. You can do it, but it just takes a lot of time. And the cost is too high in terms of just the workflow necessary to get there. But if you can expedite that, Now you're really onto something. Now you can grab data and use it in Marketo or any of your other SaaS marketing technologies to better understand the customer. Because this is another trend I think we're going to see. You have got to get better and better as a provider of any product or service of really knowing your customer, not wasting their time with unnecessary communications, and making sure the communications you do have with them are crystal clear and on point. But what do you think, Joe?
You couldn't be more correct. So one of the biggest pieces is over technology is, we all know this, is no one wants to waste money on plumbing, right? What we want to do is we want to make it in a few clicks. You can take all of your data and put it anywhere you want. And you're focusing on the business question, not the technology. So if you're going to ask questions to an analytics tool like Snowflake or like Redshift, or you want to use QuickSight, or you want to use Tableau, the historical data is the foundation of answering the question. The medium that you happen to paint that in is the analytic tool that you're choosing to use. Now, also being able to prove that I didn't give you a partial set of data to skew the data in my favor is going to become a big problem for people saying, okay, here's a set of data, but how do I know that you gave me the entire set and it's authored from you, right? That's going to be the big thing that's coming in. The Parquet format for us was we wanted to collect every version of SaaS data that we can at the highest fidelity, the highest frequency. We wanted to take it and allow customers with a few clicks to put it anywhere they want. Now, the people out there are not going to believe that, saying that's hocus pocus. But I'm telling you, all these tools, if we can take every version of data, pick it up, put it in Snowflake, put it in Redshift, put it in Tableau, all in one transaction, a matter of clicks, not code. But then you can also prove it that when you're answering this business question, I can prove that the entire set of data is there and it's authored from your company, right? If you're going to get audited, you have to prove it and say, how do I prove it, right? And that's the biggest piece, is not only that, saying, okay, here's a proof and here's the lineage of the data. There's going to be a big thing that GRAX is going to come out with, showing about lineage of your data. So the lineage of not only who authored it, but the transactional velocity of that and the origination of that. We can prove it, that it didn't go anywhere. We can concretely now prove this, that the data didn't go anywhere. This is a complete set of data, right? And now we can say, oh, the lineage actually came from here. Now we can prove it that if it's Salesforce, if it's Dynamics, if it's SAP, if it's Workday, if we're collecting all of this data, where did it come from? When was it authored? And here are the different versions of that data. And protecting it is not just about saying, oh, my system admin overwrote this data. Let me rewind that data. That's basic 101, and that'll be given away. That's basically table stakes. Historical protection of your data in the company. You're going to see a lot of movement in the metadata about data coming in 2022, and it's chaining, transactional, what we're calling is transactional chaining, right? And we're calling lineage of your data. It's there's three-dimensional, almost four-dimensional of your data with time series and kind of the different people that are touching it. It's becoming quite exciting. I know data for me is exciting. So it's kind of, I'm the classic one, that the metadata about the data and how do you learn from that is really where I start getting into.
Big thanks to all you data lovers out there. Talk to you in the new year.